Hello, hello, testing, testing, one, two, three. No, no, no.
Yeah, it's okay. I can't hear you now.
Evo ga, evo ga.
Meni ovo i dalje spada.
Te vidiš?
Hvala.
Excuse me, everybody, please, we will start in 1 minute. Please put on your headsets. Your headsets, thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. My name is Filip Vucimilovic, and on behalf of the whole Forum Plus team, we're very happy to invite you here in the European Parliament for our second International Congress, the European Catholic Youth Forum for Social Engagement. For our opening speech, we'd like to call Silvio Pulic, who is the founder of Forum Plus. Silvio Pulic.
Thank you, Philip. It seems that sound works, so maybe you don't need to use headphones. Dear participants, speakers, panelists, priests, and members of European Parliament, welcome to our second International Forum Plus Europe, the European Catholic Youth Forum for Social Engagement, 2022. We are more than delighted and grateful that we have finally reunited here in the heart of Europe, in Brussels, in the European Parliament as Forum Plus, live after a long pause caused by challenges of the global pandemic. We are excited to be able to discuss these 3 days of the conference about social teaching of the Catholic Church in relation to active engagement of youth in society. During these 3 days of the conference, we have 4 main goals which we would like to accomplish: to inform about social situation in Europe and the world, to provide education on social teaching of the Catholic Church and tools for social engagement, to get to know each other and encourage networking between you as the participants and speakers, and to initiate a fire in each of you to think about your personal vocation, your talents, and what God put on our hearts, and how we as Christians can contribute to the development of European society today. We are proud that this year, Forum Plus celebrates 10 years of existence since our first national conference, which took place at University of Split in 2012 in Croatia. And very happy that we can celebrate this 10th anniversary also here with you in Brussels. We are more than thankful to all individuals, organizations, and members of European Parliament who help us in organizing this event. Special thanks to our conference project partners, UCAD Foundation, COMESE, Commission of the Bishop Conferences of the European Union, ECPM, European Christian Political Movement, ECR Group, the European Conservatives and Reformatives Group, EPP Group, the European People's Party. And very important thanks goes to Croatian member of the European Parliament, Mr. Larislavilteach, on special event support, and also on being great support to all these years for the Forum Plus program in Croatia. So thank you, Mr. Ilčić. Also, we would like to thank members of European Parliament, Patrick Yaki, Karol Ressler, and Željana Zovko for supporting us and bringing youth group through the visitor program to our conference. We would like to open this conference with a message of inspiration. and encouragement from Pope Francis addressed to young people as Forward for a Ducat book, Catholic Social Teaching for Youth. I would like to ask Philip to read us a message of Pope Francis.
Dear young friends, only conversion of heart can make our world, which is full of terror and violence, more humane. That means patience, justice, prudence, dialogue, integrity, and solidarity with victims, the needy and the poorest, limitless dedication, love even unto death for the sake of the other. When you have understood that quite deeply, then you can change the world as committed Christians. I wish I had 1 million young Christians, or even better, a whole generation who are, for their contemporaries, walking together with social doctrine. Nothing else will change the world, but people who, with Jesus, devoted themselves to it. Pope Francis, foreword of the Ducat.
Thank you, Philip. I'm happy to announce that the conference is open, and I wish you all pleasant and blessed work these 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvio, for your welcoming speech. We will start with our first block of lectures. I would like to encourage you to take notes because you will have the opportunity to ask questions later at the end of this block. So our first lecturer is Father Manuel Enrique Barrios Prieto from Spain. He is General Secretary of Commission of the Bishops' Conferences of the European Union, and the topic of his lecture is What Pope Francis Dreams for Europe and European Union. Father Manuel, I would like to ask you to please join us.
Father Manuel was born in Madrid, Spain in 1962 and was ordained priest in Rome in 1988. He studied philosophy and theology at the Pontifical Gregorian University, obtaining the degree of Doctor in Theology with a thesis on theological anthropology based on the works of the Anglican theologian John Maguire. He also has a degree in clinical psychology from a Spanish civil university and an official European recognition as a psychotherapist. Father Manuel has been parish priest for 20 years in the Archdiocese of Madrid and Episcopal delegate for the pastoral care of the family for 10 years. He was also responsible for the Secretariat of the Spanish Bishops' Conference for Ecumenism and Interreligious Dialogue for 9 years. He was elected by the bishops of Comes as General Secretary in the Plenary Assembly celebrated in March 2019 and took office on 1st September 2019. Father Manuel speaks Spanish, Italian, English.
So, do you hear me? Yes? Okay. So, before starting with a prayer, just tell you that I'm very, very, very happy to be with you this afternoon in the European Parliament, in this first day of the European Catholic Youth Forum for Social Engagement, a day that, as we see in the program, is dedicated to personal development and cultural identity. I thank you very much for the invitation to speak here and also for involving COMECE, the Commission of the Bishops' Conference of the European Union, in this initiative. I still remember with pleasure when some of you came to our offices in Square de Meus some months ago to tell me about this initiative. I was very impressed of how young people with enthusiasm are doing these things, and I really am very sort of impressed. We as COMECE, we organize events in the Parliament, we have meetings with MEPs, but I'm very impressed when young people have this initiative and try to do things here, also in these very challenging times. So we will start these conferences and this meeting with a prayer. And the prayer I chose is a prayer by Cardinal Martini. It's a prayer that Cardinal Martini wrote in 2005 for Europe. Some of you, I think, know Cardinal Martini. He was a very good biblical scholar. He was rector of the Gregorian University in Rome and Archbishop of Milan. So I'll read this prayer. You can join it at the end, saying together, Amen. Prayer for Europe. Name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father of mankind, Lord of history, look upon this continent to which you sent philosophers, lawgivers, and people endowed with wisdom, precursors of the faith in your Son, fallen and risen. Look at these people, evangelized by Peter and Paul, by prophets, monks, and saints. Look at these regions, drenched in the blood of martyrs, moved by the voice of reformers. Look at these people, linked by so many bonds and ties, yet divided by hatred and war. Assist us in committing ourselves to a Europe of the Spirit, founded not just on economic treaties, but also on values which are human and eternal. A Europe capable of ethnic and ecumenical reconciliation, quick to welcome the stranger, respectful of human dignity. Give us confidence to see it as our duty to encourage and promote understanding between peoples, which provides for all continents justice and bread, liberty and peace. Amen. Amen. So, the title that I have chosen for these few words I'm going to tell you this afternoon is The Dreams of Pope Francis for the European Union. Dreaming. Dreaming is something different from having delusions. And it's also something different from daydreaming. And it's related to personal growth and the development of our societies. Dreaming has to do with having a vision of the future, an orientation of what we want, an image or idea that moves us and gives us direction and strength. In the scripture, it is related to prophecy and the life of important persons in the history of Israel, in the history of salvation, that started new things. I remember a book, maybe some of you know it as well, of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, called God's Dream, where he talks of human fraternity and the fact that there is no situation, however bad it may be, that is untransformable, that cannot be changed. Even the most terrible situation can be changed. And this we see in the cross of Jesus. Death, which seems the last word for us, is changed to life. I think this is a very hopeful message. There is nothing that cannot be transformed by faith, by the power of the Spirit. So before speaking about the actual dreams of Pope Francis for Europe, I would like to say something of the importance of dreaming for him and how this concept is present in his words and writings. Pope Francis uses it as a concept that speaks to us of future, of prophecy, of utopia, in the positive sense of this word. That is not as an ideology, but as a vision that unites and dynamizes different forces. It speaks to us of creativity, of making things new. I think it is a very powerful concept related to the Church's prophetic mission. We are called as Christians to be present in the world as salt of the earth and light of the world, as ferment and leaven. And the Pope says not to occupy spaces, but to put in motion processes. But the church is also called to be prophetic, and the concept of dream is very appropriate for this. Just to tell you, I was very impressed in my first meeting as Secretary General of Comice, meeting the bishops of the European Union. One of the bishops, we were discussing what is the role of Comice, of the Commission of the Bishops' Conference before the European institutions. You know that this organism was founded 40 years ago by the Church, the Catholic Church, here in Brussels, to keep a contact, a dialogue with the European institutions. And with the bishops, we were discussing what is really the role of Comice. And so we said, well, dialogue with the European institutions. But one of the bishops, the Bishop of Cyprus, said, yes, but we also have to be prophetic. We also have to give a vision to the European policymakers of the Europe we want. So Pope Francis has used this concept of dreaming in his very beautiful book, Let Us Dream. This book. It's a very, 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 very nice book. And this book is a fruit of a conversation with Austin Everreich. One of the inspirations of this book is a poem by the Cuban poet Alexis Valdés called Esperanza, written during the worst times of the COVID pandemic. And this is part of the title also of the speech today. How do we come out of the COVID pandemic? So this poet in Instagram, this is very interesting, and the Pope quotes this poem. This poet, Alexis Valdés, is a very sort of curious person and very, I would say, very sympathetic. If one follows him, he wrote this poem. I'll read it in Spanish and then a possible translation in English. Cuando la tormenta pase y se amancen los caminos y seamos sobrevivientes de un naufragio colectivo, cuando la tormenta pase, te pido, Dios apenado, que nos devuelvas mejores, como nos habías soñado. When the storm has passed, I ask you, God, with shame, that you give us back better as you had dreamed of us. God's dream for us. So the last sentence of the poem is quoted by the Pope in this new book, a book that speaks about walking together, about the path of fraternity, about synodal conversion. The Pope, Francis, speaks in this book of his 3 personal COVID experiences. I think this is very interesting. He speaks of his lung illness in 1957, in his secondary seminary year, that nearly killed him. He speaks also of his second COVID experience, his German exile to complete his studies in 1986. And then also he speaks of his stay in Cordoba, Spain in the beginning of the 90s, sent by his superiors. So he uses these experiences of his life to reflect about this experience of the COVID that we're going through, all of us. And he speaks also in this book of integral ecology, of ecological conversion. He speaks of synodality as a protective space for community discernment and not for political fight. And there's a deeper inspiration to this book. And it's a text by the prophet Isaiah, Isaiah 1, 18-20. These are the words of the prophet Isaiah in the Old Testament. Come, let us talk this over. If you are ready to listen, we will have a great future. This is the time. And I have to keep to it. Okay, I'll try. So how much time do I have left? 5 minutes. Okay. That's good that I have it in front of me. Yeah. So what does the prophet Isaiah say in this phrase of his chapter 1? Come, let us talk this over. If you're ready to listen, we will have a great future. In some translations, this text of Isaiah reads, come, let us dream. Let us dream together. God invites us to dream together with him, to hear his dream for humanity. So these are 2 inspirations of this book that helps us to understand why for the Pope this concept of dreaming is so important. Dreaming. What is the dream of God for the European Union? What do we dream for our future? Then there's another document, I'm not going to quote it, I'm not going to read it, but there's another important document for the Church, I think, today, which is a post-synodal exhortation called Querida Amazzonia. Querida Amazzonia is a document that came out from a synod that was celebrated in Rome in 2019. And then the Pope speaks about 4 dreams he has for Amazonia. He speaks about a social dream, a cultural dream, an ecological dream, and an ecclesial dream. So here again, this concept of dreaming comes out. And so now, to conclude, as I only have 3 minutes, what are the dreams of Pope Francis for Europe? What are his dreams for Europe? So I think we have a very good expression, of these dreams in a letter that he wrote to Cardinal Parolin, the Cardinal Secretary of State. This letter has the date of 27th October 2020, but in the letter at the end, the date is 22nd October, which is the memorial of St. Paul John II. And this is important because St. Paul John II is really the inspiration of this letter of the Pope on Europe. I don't know if you remember the words of John Paul II in Santiago de Compostela in 1982 when he said, "Europe, find yourself, be yourself." He really shouted these words in Santiago de Compostela. So the Pope Francis takes this idea and speaks in this letter to Cardinal Parolin, and this letter was written on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of Comece. He speaks about his 4 dreams for Europe. And I'm going to read it to avoid being longer than the 1 minute I have left.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you can take some more time if you need. Feel free.
Okay. Yes, because that's like. So, what does the Pope? What are these 4 dreams of the Pope for Europe? He says in this letter that he writes to Cardinal Parolin, and I think he also. Well, I'm gonna keep it short anyway. So I'll just read them and maybe say something about them. So he says, the first dream: I dream then of a Europe that is a friend to each and all, a land respectful of everyone's dignity, in which each person is appreciated for his or her intrinsic worth and not viewed purely from an economic standpoint or as a mere consumer. A land that protects life at every stage, from the time it arises unseen in the womb until its natural end, since no human being is the master of life, either his or her own life or the lives of others. A land that promotes work as a privileged means of personal growth and the pursuit of the common good, creating employment opportunities, particularly for the young. Being a friend to others entails providing for their education and cultural development. It entails protecting the weakest and most vulnerable, especially the elderly, the sick in need of costly care, and those with disabilities. Being a friend to others entails defending the rights, but also reminding them of their duties. So a Europe that is a friend to each and all, protects life, promotes work, promotes education and cultural development, protects the weak and the most vulnerable. A Europe that is friend to all. And this concept of friendship, I think, is also very, very important. Then his second dream: I dream of a Europe that is a family and community, a place respectful of the distinctiveness of each individual and every people, ever mindful that they are bound together by shared responsibilities, Being a family entails living in unity, treasuring differences. You know that the motto of the European Union is unity in diversity. I think this is very powerful. Beginning with the fundamental differences between man and woman. In this sense, Europe is a genuine family of peoples, all different yet linked by a common history and destiny. We are faced with a choice between a model of life that discards people and things, and an inclusive model that values creation and creatures. So the second dream that the Pope has is a Europe that is a family, a community, in which we are united with, accept and recognize our differences. I think this is a very important challenge for Europe today. I was on Monday in Poland. I had a meeting with representatives of the church there, and we see that there are differences in Europe. So being a unity in diversity. There's I think a very important concept that we lost in Maastricht, in the treaties of Maastricht. That is the concept of community. That was very, very well seen by the founding fathers of Europe. Community, person and community. So dream of a family and community. Third dream. I dream of a Europe that is inclusive and generous, a welcoming and hospitable place in which charity, the highest Christian virtue, overcomes every form of indifference and selfishness. Solidarity as an essential element of every authentic community demands that we care for one another. To be sure, we are speaking of an intelligent solidarity. This is a very nice concept, intelligent solidarity, that does more than merely attend the basic needs as they emerge. So a Europe inclusive and generous. A Europe in which solidarity is there at the center. So I think this is another important thing. And the last dream that might surprise us of the Pope, in this letter to Cardinal Parolin. I dream of a Europe marked by a healthy secularism, where God and Caesar remain distinct but not opposed. A land open to transcendence, where believers are free to profess their faith in public and to put forward their own point of view in society. The era of confessional conflict is over, but so too, let us hope, is the age of asceticism, close to others and especially to God. For it is evident that a culture or political system that lacks openness to transcendence proves insufficiently respectful of the human person. So these are the four dreams of Pope Francis for Europe. Using this very powerful concept, I'm 10 minutes beyond. So that's his fault. So these are the dreams of Pope Francis for Europe. So we would say, no, opening this conference, that we have these 3 days together to think, also based on the social doctrine of the Church, which is a very powerful instrument. What are our dreams for Europe? Also keeping in mind these dreams of Pope Francis. What Europe do we want? And not also we want as a desire a utopia that is far from us, but what is the Europe that we are going to commit ourselves to construct? In some way, the future of Europe depends on us. This conference on the future of Europe that has been celebrated and was concluded now on the 9th of May with the proposals, these 49 proposals presented to the heads of the European institutions. This conference of Europe had this purpose to tell people, look, the Europe that we want is a Europe that we create, the Europe that we build together. So what is our dream for Europe? I think this is a very, very useful sort of question. And maybe with these ideas of Pope Francis in mind, maybe we can sort of envision a future to work for together. So this is my hope and my prayer for these days. And thank you again very much for inviting me, and congratulations for this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Manuel, for your interesting lecture, and I would like to give you a certificate.
Oh, thank you.
Our next lecturer should have been Alexander Havard, but because of our previous delay, he was unfortunately unable to join us, but we still thank him for his will to participate. And our last lecturer in this block is Father Jason Sharon from USA. He is a pastor of Holy Trinity Ukrainian Catholic Church, and the topic of his theme is How the Church Built Europe, Jesus' Commandment of Love. And he is joining us online.
Christ is risen. Truly, he is risen. I imagine you may have heard about my trip to Ukraine a few 2 months ago at the beginning of the war to rescue the 22 orphans and subsequently the 20 refugees in addition to the 22 orphans. And for that reason, I figured that we would speak about love. I don't know about all of you young people, but when you get to the middle age point in life, and you will get there, is you are going to ask yourself, what does my faith consist in? Is it an intellectual faith? Is it a life of piety? Is it a life of action? Or is it all three of these things bound together? Hopefully, it's all of these bound together. And that's what we see on the cross, that God desires in his heart to be with his people. He knows that this is the fulfillment of all prophecy, and he puts it into the flesh. And that's what love is. Allow me to share with all of you a quote from someone who was no European, but he was a great Christian, Saint Isaac of Syria. There is love like a small lamp, which goes out when the oil is consumed, or like a stream which dries up when it doesn't rain. But there is a love that is like a mighty spring gushing up out of the earth. It keeps flowing forever, and it is inexhaustible. Now, this first example is human, and the second example is divine and has God as its source. What is a charitable heart? It is the heart of him who burns with pity for all creation. He looks at the creatures and his eyes are filled with tears. His heart is filled with deep compassion and limitless patience. It overflows with tenderness, and it cannot bear to see or hear any evil or the least grief endured by the creature. This is Saint Isaac of Syria. You can hear in this description the words of our Lord from the cross. It's like he spoke to Saint Isaac that he could not bear to see or hear the evil into which his sons and daughters were immersed. In order to understand this gospel teaching on love, let's begin at the very beginning in the book of Genesis. When God made humanity and placed us in the garden, so the original story of creation that he has given us, it plays out in those first couple chapters that we're made for three things. We're made for leisure, for labor, and for love. And true enough, we experience brokenness in all three of those categories: leisure, labor, and love. And that's the way that the great monasteries of Christendom broke up their days, according to leisure, rest, labor, the work in the field, and in the various майстерня, as they say in Ukrainian, or the artisan craft shops where they would make their liturgical items, and in love, prayer. That's what prayer is. Leisure, labor, and love. And it's for that that we are made. And as we read in Genesis, as the story goes, God, who's good, he makes the world good, and everything he sees, he says, this is good, this is very good. He makes man and woman and says, good, this is very good. But the story of the Bible doesn't end with chapter 2 in Genesis. It goes into chapter 3, and chapter 3 adds another dimension. Into this life of love comes the serpent, and he was the most cunning of all the animals that God made. And there's something really interesting that when Adam and Eve fall, there are these consequences that come from it. And there's actually a curse of the serpent, right? So the Lord God looks at the serpent and he says, you know, you're cursed, and basically you will crawl on your stomach all the days of your life. And he says to the woman that you will know child pain. You'll know childbearing pain when you bring forth children. And it looks like God is angry almost. And he says to the man, is that you're going to toil, and you shall eat of its yield of the fruit of the earth all the days of your life, and thorns and thistles shall bring forth to you as you eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your face. And that's where he gets his bread from. And so it seems like God's angry with man and woman. But it's interesting here that God isn't cursing and punishing them. This is a remedy. It's like what a doctor gives to his patient to make that patient whole and well. It's a remedy. And it is through this labor, the physicality of it, of Eve physically experiencing pain in childbirth, through Adam physically having to provide for his family by sweat, contending with thorns and thistles. And when they're expelled from the garden, they're given in their nakedness, they're given leather coverings, the skins made. Well, where did those skins come from? They came from an animal, invariably, that God had to slay in order to cover over the nakedness of Adam and Eve. And so this gives us an understanding of what God meant when he's punishing them, is that he's really preparing the gospel. This is the first gospel, the proto-evangelium. This here, chapters 2 and chapter 3 especially, is the first gospel of the gospel, in which we see what love is. It entails the flesh. It entails toil. It entails tears. It entails tears. Things being pulled apart in our flesh, in our heart. And all of this foreshadows the great emblem of love universal, which is the cross. For here we see that as Adam worked with toil and sweat and thorns in order to provide for his bride, so too with the new Adam on the cross, the greatest emblem of love in the universe, we see this new Adam sweating tears of blood and thorns as well. No coincidence that it's a crown of thorns, fulfillment of Adam, what Adam neglected to do. That Adam was supposed to be present for his bride and was not there. And so he has to work and sweat through thorns. But the new Adam is there for his bride, and he endures everything, the sweat and the thorns. Now, this is the basis of Europe. People can talk about documents. They can talk about the social teaching of the church. They can talk about the magisterium. But all of that is emptiness if Jesus Christ and him crucified is not proclaimed. We can use the language of the diplomatic corps. We can use the language of philosophy. We can use the language of the very complex and edifying legal systems that have come out of the European experiment these past 2 millennia. But all of this is merely a mansion in the sky if we do not focus on the fundamental building block of this entire enterprise. And it is love to the cross. And that is Jesus Christ. How is it that Europe was composed from such disparate and conflicting tribes and languages and customs, going back to antiquity, to now see the unity that she now possesses? How is this possible? I'd like to give an overview of love, this love of the cross that was played out through antiquity from the beginning of Christianity. I want to take here, my friends, the example, the witness of the church's biggest critics. I'm not going to quote here those who are sympathetic to the mission of the church. No. What I want to propose to you are these criticisms, are these comments rather, from some of the greatest critics of Christianity to demonstrate that it was love and love alone that constituted the Europe of today. Over 100 years ago, there was a great anti-Catholic English writer, W.E.H. Lecky, and he concluded that neither in practice nor in theory, neither in the institutions that were founded, nor in the place that was assigned to it in the scale of duties, did charity in antiquity occupy a position at all comparable to that which it has obtained by the church. So it's both the quality and the quantity of Catholic charitable work that distinguished it and makes it so historically interesting and compelling. Now, one objection can be raised to what I've said so far. And that objection is that, well, there was the ancient school of philosophical thought known as Stoicism. And the Stoics did indeed seem to be people who called for doing good deeds out of a sense of duty and without any expectation of reciprocity. That's true. The Stoics, in effect, believed that the wise man was a man who had no emotional connection to the world, who was such a master of his own person that he was utterly unperturbed by outside events, no matter how tragic. Well, it was in that spirit that the Stoics engaged in charitable work. They taught that the wise man knows that he is a citizen of the world, and all men are in effect to be cared for. But they are to be cared for without lending any emotional attachment to the relationship. I want to quote for you Seneca. Seneca said, who was a Stoic, that the sage will console those who weep, but without weeping with them. He will succor the shipwrecked, give hospitality to the poor and alms to the poor, and restore the son to the mother's tears. He will save the captive from the arena and even bury the criminal. But in all this, his mind and his countenance will be untroubled. He will feel no pity. He will do good, for he is born to assist his fellows, to labor for the welfare of mankind, and to offer each one his part. However, his countenance, his soul, will betray no emotion as he looks upon the withered legs, the tattered rags, the bent and emaciated frame of the beggar. But he will help those who are worthy, and like the gods, his learning will be toward the wretched, but it is only diseased eyes that will grow moist in beholding tears in other eyes. That's a long quote, but the point of it is that you can do these things, these acts of mercy, out of a sense of obligation, but you must never, ever lend pity. That was the spirit of charity as the Stoics understood it. They themselves were to be unperturbed by outside events and the misfortunes of those whom they helped. Now we compare that to our Lord Jesus Christ. And when he looks upon that sorry scene in Bethany, when he goes to visit Martha and Mary, there he sees Lazarus, dead 4 days. And how does the God-man react? It's the shortest verse in the Bible. Maybe some of you know it. It's 2 words. And Jesus reacts to that scene by saying, the scriptures say, Jesus wept. And those 2 words bring down the entire edifice of the Stoic philosophy. And because of that, 2,000 years later, we can say that Mother Teresa is a hero. And not just Mother Teresa, but untold numbers of men and women down through the ages who have given of their wealth, their time, their talent to help others and to invest their own emotional, spiritual energy in the process. You know, we know about St. Augustine of Hippo, but what we don't know often enough is that he built a hospice for pilgrims, that he personally ransomed slaves, that he gave away expensive clothes, sold them, took the money and gave it to the poor. And we also hear about the same in all of these great early church fathers whose high theology we study, St. Ephrem and St. Cyprian, how they took care of people during plague and during famine. St. Cyprian says, if we love those who love us, how are we better than the heathens? If we are children of God, he who sends rain on the good and the bad, quoting our Lord Jesus here, then let us do good to those who persecute us. This was the beginning of Roman Christianity and European Christianity. We look at the Roman soldier Pachomius. And as you know a bit of history, you know that the Romans were not so great to the early Christians. But as Pachomius looked upon the famine and the disease which were destroying the soldiers in the Roman army, he was brought to tears as he looked and saw that the only people coming out to help his soldiers so afflicted by disease were the very Christians whom they had so bitterly persecuted. He wondered what kind of religion could enable people to be so disinterested in their goodness, so benevolent, and so indiscriminate in doing good. And so he began to study this religion. What do you think happened as he began to investigate this faith? Is that before long, he himself converted. And this is the story of many of the early men who built Europe. Through their blood and their witness, is that they saw this self-emptying love in the flesh, and they themselves began to imitate it, no matter the cost, even to the point of crucifixion and martyrdom, like our great Lord and God, Jesus Christ. The pagan writer Lucian wrote that the earnestness with which the people of this new religion helped one another in their needs was incredible. He was a pagan, and he said they spare themselves nothing for this end. Their first lawgiver put it in their heads that they are all brethren. My friends, I could go on for quite a while here, but I only have 15 minutes. I want to share with you finally, 2 other opponents of Christianity in Europe who concluded with praise for the witness of those Christians. One is Voltaire, that great cynic and skeptic and critic of Christianity, who had to admit that he could not get over the extraordinary sacrifice of the women religious, women of high birth, of intelligence, of good standing, of wealth, who gave up everything in order to relieve human misery, the sight of which was so revolting to our delicacy. End of quote. And he said that people separated from the Roman religion have imitated this only imperfectly. and that so great was the generous charity of these religious sisters. Julian the Apostate, who lived around the year 360, Roman emperor, hated Christianity and tried to revive the pagan priesthood, the pagan ceremonies. And he would speak about how frustrated he was that the pagan priests were not as good as and kind as the Christian priests. He said that he kept coming back to people being attracted to the Christian religion because the priests in that religion were so good and kind and generous, and the faithful in that religion were so good, kind, and generous. And it drove Julian crazy. And he would write to his people, why cannot the pagan priests be that good? Why are the pagans not so kind as the Christians are? And by this, the Christians are coming in and snatching up people left and right by their good example. My friends, it seems to me that the Europe of tomorrow depends on the Catholics of today. If today we can live with the same quality and quantity of godly love, like Augustine and Pachomius and Mother Teresa and Vincent de Paul, then tomorrow's Europe will have the outline of the love of the Son of God. However, if we do not live that love, then tomorrow's Europe will look like the love of Seneca, a society of necessity. For us to flourish as we were first meant to in the garden, we need to love one another in the flesh, thorns, sweat, tears, and pain. And through the thorns, the pain of childbirth, the sewing of leather garments for one another's nakedness, by this sweat of self-giving love, the world will know that Europe is in fact the gift of the church to human history. Europe is the fruit of God's love. Christ is risen.
Thank you, Father Jason. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful lecture you gave us right now. For a little context for everybody, I'm going to tell the biography of Father Jason. Father Jason Sharon is a priest in Ukraine Greek Catholic Church since 2008. He currently serves in two parishes as well as in a bi-ritual capacity with the Diocese of Pittsburgh. He has worked in education at the primary, secondary, and post-secondary level for 10 years. Father Jason founded board member of a Catholic Classical Academy for Children in Pittsburgh. He has been actively engaged in war in Ukraine, helping refugees and Ukrainian people across the world. He currently teaches Eastern Christian theology at Franciscan University at Steubenville and pastoral theology at Byzantine Catholic Seminary, Pittsburgh, USA. And Father Jason is married and is blessed with 7 children. Father Jason, thank you one more time. It was a really pleasure listening to you, and we hope to see you again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to pause now for a quick break. Thank you very much. Just for everybody that's leaving the room, it will start in 7:20.
See ya.
Please take your seats.
Opa.
Cristian ne učiš mi u Sarajevu? Sarajevo danas, mi tako sa panom.
All right, thank you for coming back and thank you for joining us online again. We will continue now with our panel of the members of the European Parliament. My colleague Teo Josic will take it from here.
Nice greetings, everyone. Good evening. We're going to have lectures with a member of the European Parliament. With me is also Philip, as you know. We will be the moderators in this panel. First, we will listen to Mr. Larislavilteach, a member for European Parliament from ECR, coming from Croatia. The name of Ladislav lecture is To Do What Is Needed to Be Done. After Ladislav, we will have the honor to listen to Margarita Della Pisa Carrion, a member of European Parliament from ECR, coming from Spain. This basic lecture will be how a Christian vision of life and society allows a maximum development of human rights. Afterwards, we will have a chance to listen to a Croatian member of European Parliament from EPP, Carlo Ressler. The name of his topic is Politics and as a Christian Vocation. Therefore, we will listen to Mihaela Šojdrova, a member of European Parliament from EPP. And she will join us with the topic Christian values in culture and education politics. This lecture will be held online. After Mihaela, we'll listen to Maximilian Krach, a member of the Imperial Parliament from ID, coming from Germany. Maximilian is going to bring us closer to the topic of values, to be precise, values as unifying factor of conservative politics. After Maximilian, we will listen to Patrick Yaki, member of European Parliament, from ECR from Poland. His lecture will also be online. Patrick will introduce the topic, the Catholic in 21st century. Why does the Christ teaching continue to make great sense? Finally, we will have the chance to listen to Bert-Jan Rausen, member of European Parliament from ECR from Netherlands, with the lecture Back to Our Roots. At the end of this panel, we will have the discussion and time for Q&A starting from 8:30 p.m. So feel free to take notes during these lectures. Our first lecture is Larislavilteach, so I would like to ask you to, you can start the lecture now.
A quick intro to Larislavilteach. He is a Croatian member of European Parliament, and in the European Parliament, he is a member of ECR, the European Conservatives and Reformist Group, and the Vice President of ECPM, the European Christian Political Movement. Larislav is the leader of Hrast Party, a coalition partner of the Croatian Sovereignists. Larislav is also one of the founders and presidents of NGO Grozd since 2008, which is Voice of Parents for Children Association, which is committed to the improving the quality of children's upbringing and improving the position of families in modern society. In his work, Larislav is strongly promoting the importance of family values, marriage, and education. Larislav is also an accomplished musician, a violinist, and a member of the Symphonic Orchestra of Croatian radio and television since 1995. Thank you, Mr. Ilicic.
Thank you. I cordially greet you all. I'm very glad that you are here in the European Parliament. I'm very glad that I'm here with you. And I hope that this conference will bring some changes in your life. Social engagement. Social engagement is something difficult because when you engage socially, then actually you want to move people from one place to another. And usually people don't want to move. You know, they are pretty satisfied with they are, and they're very passive, and it's not easy to do it. So social engagement is a difficult task. When we speak about political engagement, then it is very difficult. And when we speak about political engagement for Catholics, it is terribly difficult. So it means that when you will, for example, promote, I don't know, pro-life, then you will be labeled as, you know, like you want to misuse women's body as an incubator. If you promote marriage and family, then they will say, your opponents will say that you hate other people like LGBT person. And if you, for example, want to promote parental rights in sexual education, then they will say that you're against sexual education. Then at the end, you know, whenever you will promote Christian values, you will be misinterpreted. You will be, you know, like you're old-fashioned, you're from middle age, you're non-scientific, you are pro-fascist, you're clero-fascist, and so on and so on. So in short, we are the minority. You have to face that. You know, that when we speak about Christian Europe, yes, we can speak about Christian roots of Europe, but when we look at our society, especially on political level, we are the minority. And then there is a question, why should I suffer? Why should I deal with politics? I can have decent life, I can have my family, I can have a decent job, you know. Why would I deal with politics? Why would I be always surrounded by cameras and with some naughty people who wants to present you as something what you are not? What is the meaning, the real meaning of Christians in politics? I would say that actually it is a simple question, because the meaning of Christians in politics is the meaning of our lives. And I know that you're young now, but you know that you will die, that you will be sick someday, and all of us will die. All of us will lay in a bed very sick, waiting to die. And then there will be a crucial question. Is the death the end of everything? Or has Jesus really resurrected? And if he has really resurrected, then if he overcame the death, then everything is changed. So everything has meaning, everything has sense. So every suffering has sense. Not just that has sense, but as much as we suffer, the much we participate in resurrection of Jesus Christ. And if we realize how big Jesus is and God is, and if we see how much he loves us, because he was the first who loved, and then we just have to return, give back this love, and that is not that difficult, because when somebody loves you that much, it is not difficult to give back love to this person. So if we see how big God is, then our suffering is nothing comparing to this. And all what is important in that moment is that we say, your will be done. And as Mary said, fiat, I will do whatever is needed to be done. And that is the point, to do what is needed to be done. I don't know if you remember the gospel about merciful Samaritan. You know the gospel? There was a wounded man, and then, I don't know if you remember Jesus, when he said this story, he took two bad examples. Do you remember who it was? Yes? Yes, a priest and a Levite. I don't know if Father Barrios is here. Okay, but he's a good one, so we won't take this one. But anyway, so these were people. These were people, who were really important people, who had important job of serving God, priest and Levite. But Jesus took them as bad examples. Why? Because they didn't do what was needed to be done. And he took a foreigner, a Samaritan, and he said, he is a good example. Of course, this Samaritan also had another business, another work to do. He wasn't, passing this path with the intention of finding a wounded man. Of course not. He had another job to do. But when he saw a wounded man, he stopped and he helped. And that is what is important. So our lives, and you as young people, it's not that you find your plan for your future. I wanted to be a musician. What I like to do, I like to play violin. I like to solve some mathematical problems with my children. I like that. And I like play football and basketball and that. And all of these social things was always the boring things, the most boring thing I could imagine, And at the end, I have to deal with that. So the only thing what is important, to be open, to do what is needed to be done, because God knows better what we have to do, not us, but He does. And we have to be open to this. And what I wanted to say, the politics in Europe today is a wounded person. So we need Christian people in politics. We really need you in politics. Because a lot of people in this parliament, you have to come at our sessions. You will hear a lot of this today. There are a lot of people who are openly against Christian values. It's not just Christian values like love, life, marriage, and things like this. The freedom is on the stage. The freedom, the basic free will, what is also Christian value. So they want to impose their worldview to all of us. They don't want to give us the freedom to be different, to be Christians. and they are very clever and very capable in what they are doing. So we really need you in politics. So I would really like you to consider the path not which are on your plans, but what God thought and still what he thinks it is good for you and what is good for society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ladislav, for this interesting lecture. I would like to give you, I would like to say thank you to this great competition. For today is Margarita de la Pisa Carrion, member of.
Thank you very much for your invitation for Plus. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the organizers of this wonderful conference, and thank you for you all. This is such a wonderful group of young Christians engaged with society. In the middle of 20th century, there was an urgent need to guarantee the dignity of the human being, to prevent the atrocities in the two world wars. The dignity of human being was destroyed, even justified by legal regimes. Great political leaders and intellectuals of the time took into account this international concern and drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Human rights that would act as legal pillars based on universal principles that will act as reference, limits that should not be crossed, trusts that could inspire laws, the natural wisdom that is inserted by God in the human heart, directed toward God's goods in defense of human dignity, freedom, and life. This was the precise vision of Christian humanism. But human being can also be confused and lose this reference. Regarding this point, read the copy of paper that you have about Veritatis Splendor of John Paul II, encyclica. As human beings, we are always in a dilemma, confusing God's truth with lies. But there are hope, because in the darkness of sins, there are always the light of the Creator who called us to search and search and constantly search to find a true and a complete meaning of life, as not thinking on the death, but more hopeless. But trying to search a meaning of life. Christian humanism integrates the totality of the person. It includes all of its dimensions: physical, psychological, affective, and spiritual. Norms must be regulated, taking into account this comprehensive approach. And just law appear when we parcel human life and only attend one dimension, forgetting others. Christianity allows us to give a more complete and perfect approach of human rights. Understand our lives as something transcendent that it's beyond satisfying the more desires, overcome selfishness for the search of this common God. When we don't count on God, we try to solve issues by ourselves from a practical and material point of view. And it is then when we easily make mistakes. The vision that Christianity brings to society is key to the foundation of human rights. Since its origin, Christianity did not propose a philosophy of morality of life, but only to follow Christ, to follow a living person who identifies with the totality of incarnated human values. Human rights must have this transcendent dimension. Human rights have their foundation of this Christian origin, where love, dignity, and equality between people have always been present. Understanding dignity as something inherent to each human life, no matter the size, no matter the age, the capacities, or the autonomy. We are all a gift. We are all unique and with an infinite value. And as Father Manuel told us, dream by God. Today, we see the progressive degradation of these human rights because a materialistic and utilitarian vision is invaded the private and public sphere. This is benefying ideology to corrupt the natural sense of reality. Natural law allows us to understand that the human beings seek good and elevate us by avoiding the evil. If not, our heads are lost, and we are in a risk of following the most basic instincts. We become deshumanists, said. We see this situation clearly when perverse ideology, such as gender ideology, of the growing pressure of the definition of abortion as human right. This is invading our daily work in the committees, in the European Parliament, and national policies. These ideologies regulate norms at the service of interests in favor of culture of death. The Christian vision is precisely the key not to lose the right direction these days. It is the key that protects us from not being manipulated. Christians propose a formula to grow in virtues because it involves a commitment with our direct to serve other. I invite you to search for the truth and not to lose hope in this journey of relationship with God. In this sense, it's fundamental to invest time in your spiritual life, in our spiritual life, and nourish our faith and overcome a purely materialistic reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. De La Pisa. That was very nice. And we'd like to thank you very much for your help from you and your office in our days of preparation. Quick summary on Mrs. De La Pisa. She is a Spanish MEP and also a member of ECR. She graduated at the Complutense University of Madrid with a specialization in pharmacy. Additionally, Mrs. De La Pisa also holds a master's degree in neuropsychology and education and a master's degree for women and leadership. Mrs. De La Pisa is a member of the Committee on Women Rights and Gender Equality, the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. Her main concern is the current social situation of loss of values, which leads her to engage in the Spanish political party Vox. This follows topics such as family, education, and women's issues. Mrs. De La Pisa has also taken a part as a moderator in family orientation courses and promotes the value of life and motherhood in today's society and everyday life. She is also active in the association Red Madre, which helps mothers who are in difficult situations. Last but not least, she is married and a proud mother of 9 children. Thank you, Mrs. De La Pisa. Carlo Ressler is a young Croatian MEP and a member of EPP from 2019. Mr. Ressler graduated at University of Zagreb, precisely at the Faculty of Law. He is also vice chair at Intergroup on Demographic Challenges, Family Work, Balance, and Youth Transitions. Additionally, Carlo is a member of European People's Party, Christian Democrats. In his work, Mr. Ressler advocates for the democratic Christian solidarity in Europe. Mr. Ressler is also passionate about learning languages. He speaks English, Italian, and German. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Dear participants, dear colleagues, dear friends, it's really a pleasure to address you today at the beginning of really looks like a very interesting, well-constructed, but also passionate program to which many of you have invested quite a lot of your time, focus, energy in the past months and weeks. And that's why I really thank you for this, especially to Silvio, Tihana, Dinko, because this really deserves one applause immediately in the beginning. I think it will be more useful to have a chance to really discuss and to have this panel open for your questions, but I would like to give a short introduction. I will try to be as fast and as swift as possible, but I think that it's good to give at least some kind of a context. There is little doubt that we really live in an age of deep and rapid global change, which are definitely transforming our Europe, our world, but are also influencing deeply and also sometimes really intimately our daily lives. Demographic decline, population collapse, climate change, digital transformation, all the new spheres of the use of artificial intelligence, all these factors are already today shaping the lives of our generations in Europe, but they will shape the lives of our generations in the years to come, that's for sure. The pandemic, and now also from recently the Russian aggression on Ukraine, have made it additionally clear how really interconnected and fragile our societies really are. Societies that have been already fragmented by the ever-increasing atomization, fragmentation, but also polarization of our societies that have still further been intensified by the intense use of the social networks. And all these growing uncertainties, growing global challenges are really obliging us to continuously seek for new answers. But at the same time, we do not have to start from the scratch, because Christian ideas of reconciliation, of solidarity, of subsidiarity are really in the foundations of the European Union, and they have helped us develop our culture, our history, our legal systems, architecture, language, and many other different aspects of European life that we do not even think about when we think about it at all. Our main roots, the roots of the European Union, the roots of European civilizations are definitely in our Christian heritage, and we should never shy away from that fact. At the same time, it is quite clear that our timeless Christian Democrat principles should definitely be made relevant to today's most pressing European challenges that I have already mentioned in the beginning. And I can maybe just try to sketch that kind of approach in some of the topics, in some of the themes, in some of the issues that I really think that they definitely are. In the area of environment, preservation of nature and stability of the environment are definitely one of the most priorities for the future generations. It is therefore crucial to be conscious about the fact that our current consumer model is really not sustainable in the long run, and that we will need a fundamental shift towards the environment. And I think that in this sense,
Laudato Si, the encyclical of Pope Francis, also clearly shows us that ecology goes far beyond just the relations towards nature, and is also, and even more, about the relations between us, between people. Second point I would like to briefly tackle on and touch is related to the digital revolution, because digital transformation of the modern age is really impacting our lives like never before. It forces us to deal with some of the questions that we have not faced before as human beings, challenging ethical principles especially. And here there is one saying that basically really sums up the scope of the challenge in this regard, and that is that the artificial intelligence will for sure be either the best or the worst technology or invention that happened to our society, that happened to humankind, but we still at this time do not know in which way it will go. And for us Christian Democrats, that's why it's really crucial to use all the new technology in the service of people and in the service of the common good, and not in the service of either profit or at the other side of the extreme, and that's also exists already today, with the intention of controlling the population. Another issue that I want to mention is the question of migration that will definitely shape the world we live in. As in our generation, this will mean that millions of people will be and already are now on the move. The migration pressure in Europe that we faced in 2015, or that we continue to face until then, is just the tip of the iceberg, and that's why it is really crucial to develop responsible and fair rules now at this moment when these rules are being made. We have to obviously start from our human approach to every human being, especially to refugees who are fleeing the war with their families. We can see now the situation in Ukraine. But at the same time, we also have to be resolute towards those who abuse our European solidarity system because they do not have the right for international protection. And we have to be even stronger against those who are using this pain of the people who are fleeing their countries for their own profit. This right balance is definitely a complex task. I can tell you that when I visit schools in many different areas of Croatia, this is one of the topics of the fiercest discussions between people, because it really involves many different aspects that also require our solidarity, but also require our responsibility. And that's for sure one of the topics that will have to be tackled, that is really practical topic, that really requires our answers, but it also requires us to start from the positions of our Christian faith and to try to be at the same time full of solidarity, full of humanity, but also full of responsibility. I don't want to go now into too many of these areas. I would definitely just want to mention in passing at least the demographic challenge that is really uneven throughout Europe, because we can see that it is affecting different member states in different ways. And it definitely has to be tackled, not only with money, not only with resources, also from the European level, but also more broadly with some kind of a change in our perception of how we perceive family, how we perceive balance between family life and between professional life. That is sometimes really difficult to tackle, but in these areas we will have to do much more, because as I usually say, this is probably the most ignored, the most neglected topic and pressing issue at the European level. regardless of the fact that we, by we mean Croatia, succeeded in including demography as one of the priorities also of the European Commission, and that currently we have a portfolio for demography in the European Commission for the first time in its history. Before finishing this first part, I would like to also mention one horizontal issue that I think that's very crucial for the work of us parliamentarians here, but I think that it's also crucial for our societies today. And I told you already in the beginning that I see it as really burdened with atomization, with fragmentation, and with polarization. And in that sense, I think that we all really have the responsibility to go beyond this, to go beyond these divisions, to try to really build bridges even with those with different views, not to ignore our starting points, not to really shy away from our heritage, not to shy away from our deep intrinsic moral values, but really in order to work on this conciliation, to work on this societal reconciliation in a way, because I think that we really all lack discussions, real discussions, even really here in this house. We lack honest dialogue in order to try to unite, to try to really build bridges, to try to avoid social fragmentation, which is very difficult. And once we have it, it is difficult to go backwards. And I can fully understand that that's sometimes very demanding, that really sometimes asks from us one step forward. But I think that this is truly Christian, and I really think that's necessary. I would stop here. Obviously, I'm very open to any of your questions, to the panel discussion we might have later, but I want to thank you for your interest, thank you for your patience, and really compliment your interest in these topics and your ideas and willingness to really engage, not necessarily in a political way, but to be active in your society, because I think that's one of the elements of education also, in which young generations really have a special role, special responsibility, and this is sometimes overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo, for this interesting lecture. Next, we will have Michaela Šojdrova coming from Czech Republic, from EPP. You can now start your lecture.
Thank you, Mrs. Šojdrova, for joining us online. Just a quick bio. She is MEP from Czech Republic from 2014. Since then, she is a member of EPP and a vice chair intergroup on children's rights. Also, Mrs. Šojdrova is vice chair of culture and education, where she is the EPP group's vice coordinator. Prior to entering politics, she worked at the head office of the Czech School Inspection. She is also a member of the European Cultural Heritage, Ways of St. James, and other European cultural roots. On top of that, she is a member of Intergroup on Disability. From 2014 until 2019, she was also a member of the Committee of Women's Rights and Gender. Ms. Šojdrova, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I apologize that I'm not with you.
We do not hear you. Just give us a moment.
Now it's fine. I can hear you fine, so I hope.
It's getting better.
Now? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So again, I'm very happy to have me on this panel, on your conference, which is very interesting. And I am happy to see my dear colleagues, Carlos and others. I apologize that I am not in Brussels because I'm a little bit sick. So I prefer to stay home. So thank you that we can be in this remote way. I think that these issues are very topical issues, especially nowadays. I'm Christian, and a member of Christian Democratic political party in the Czech Republic. This means that I have entered politics mainly because I want to bring in politics values based on our beliefs and what we see as meaningful. These values include human dignity, protection of life, freedom, solidarity, responsibility, and subsidiarity. My colleagues, previous speaker, they have said many things about it. I need to stress out the golden rule of moral. Treat others as you would like others to treat you. This rule has its roots in the Bible, verses Matthew and Luke. Nowadays, it has served as a template of the categorical imperative of Immanuel Kant, and it's used, accepted by general public. In terms of culture and education, it is clear that the European culture is built on Christianity and deserves to be seen often related to Christianity, cathedrals, churches, or statues adorning squares and parks, and all civilization is built on Christianity in European Union. The Christian culture is transferred to the current day in the form of cultural heritage protection in culture, if we are speaking. These are the values we need to protect and nurture. It is a very conservative approach to protect the valuable things and see the value in them. We need to focus on the very principle of cultural heritage protection and its development. So it's a little bit our role. All those norms and values are very much reflected in my approach towards the legislation concerning the digital environment and technologies. I am quite conservative in this regard, but as you can see, I'm still online with you, so I use digital devices, of course. I belong among those politicians who strongly stand for copyright protection and right of authors. So what is not allowed offline should not be allowed offline. In this sense, I advocate against the abuse of children and for their protection, as well as fight against disinformation. So don't lie, don't steal. There are Christian imperatives that it should be used also in the digital sphere, in online sphere. On the one of the cultural initiative is the Lux Audience Award, which provides a platform for many great winning films. There have been several winning films depicting religious life, such as Ida in 2014, I think you remember. I would like to recommend the movie, which is now recent film in this competition. All members of European Parliament can watch, and we can provide also to you a movie Quo Vadis Ida this year, which is not at first sight related to religion, but still is. It is about the Srebrenica massacre in 1995. It's a documentary movie, and the abuse of religion. These are the moments when the golden rule is really imperative. Moving to education, which is very close to my heart. While I was working in the Czech National Assembly, I strongly supported churches' schools. So they would have a certain degree of autonomy on one hand, and public support and financing on other hand. I believe it worked out. It is working until now, this legislation, and Christian churches, schools are irrepressible in our educational system. They are minorities. They present in Czech Republic about 5% of schools and students, only 5%. But they are excellent. They have the best. They have the best results, and also they are very inclusive. They are in competition, and they should be competitive. The Christianism, like part of the content, help to the church's school to be competitive. I don't know if some of you is alumni, if you were in a church school, maybe you have your own experiences. The added value of church-based school might not be apparent right away, but certainly in the long perspective. This added value should be emphasized, especially nowadays, where young people are confronted by relativism from all sides. These schools can provide a firm life orientation for young people, even though it is a long-term goal without certainty. It's just opportunity. If it is some possibility for young people. Christian values in education, it means community. You mentioned that I work on the school's inspection. I don't distinguish between churches and public schools. We should monitor, evaluate, control all schools, but I saw differences. Because churches, schools, they build community. Teachers, they should do it. They should do it, and it's their added value. But of course, in the best schools, they have the best leadership and the best teachers team and a strong partnership with parents. But the Christianism and churches, schools, they have special approach to the partners, to the parents. They are really their partners. They respect responsibility of parents. So it is they don't want replace the parents. So, but the quality of churches school is not automatic, because the teachers and students are not saint. They are not angels. They are normal. They have their problems, but we have big expectation, and the teachers and the churches has big responsibility, because the teachers, the Christians and Christian values, it's really expectation that they will more and better understand. They will accompany the students and parents in all difficulties. So these schools should be healthy competition in the majority of traditional public education system. In a way, they could mutually exchange good practices and inspire each other. So students are the center of interest of both, but they are really added value what we can consider. I made a great effort for ethical education to be taught in all schools, and my vision is that all teachers in all schools, from primary, secondary, that they go through this education as well. They should be personas representing ethics as role models, because they decide. I think overall we all remember good and bad teachers. Maybe the bad teachers we forget, but the really teachers who influenced me for the future, it was really persons. Christianity influenced human quality. It is not automatic, but we all expect it should be. The role of the church is another story. It's not my job, but I should say.
Excuse me, Mrs. Shorjova. If I may just quickly interrupt, we're gonna have to get to the forum soon. So if you can finish your final thoughts, because we have to be out by 9 o'clock. Thank you.
I'm finishing.
Oh, thank you.
Just, I would like to say I am a politician who is responsible for the political framework, and I am taking care of it as good as I can. So thank you very much for the invitation. I am not sure if you are interested in this. I hope yes. And you can have a comments and questions. Thanks a lot. See you.
Thank you for an interesting lecture. After Michaela, we will listen to Maximilian Krach, a member of European Parliament from ID. His lecture is Values as a Unifying Factor of Conservative Politics.
Mr. Maximilian Krach is a German MEP, starting his mandate in 2019. He is a member of the Identity and Democracy Party. He works in the Committee for International Trade, INTA. Mr. Krach studied law in Germany, in Dresden, and now holds a doctorate in law. He additionally graduated at London and Columbia Business School with an MBA. Aside from a strong background in German law, Maximilian has experience as a board member of corporations, trusts, and foundations. Mr. Krach.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, I'm also a churchgoer. But I come from a party that is not dedicated Christian. So we are conservative, but that does not necessarily mean that we have a Christian part of us. And this is not very uncommon in Western Europe, because if I would say I do now a Christian politics, I had to be aware that very significant parts of the German church would say, no, you are not Christian. We are much more progressive and much more left-leaning now. So we are always in the problem that we follow an agenda out of a Christian ethics, which is not necessarily shared by the major part of the German and Western European church. So be happy that you live in Croatia, or that maybe you live in Poland or other CEE countries where things are clearer than us. But that's not the issue of today. I have to talk about values as a unifying part of conservative politics. And that is a quite heavy issue, because I could, on the values, on conservatism, and on politics, you could write PhD thesis, and I have 5 minutes. So if we talk about politics, then the easiest explanation, or the mechanics of politics, is that you have 2 ways to do politics. The first thing is, you can negotiate, you can be a diplomat, and you can say, I have interest, you have interest, let's find a common ground. So it's a diplomatic way. It is finding the smallest common ground and make a deal with each other. The other way to do politics is to say, we share the same beliefs. Let's join together and follow the same agenda. So you have an interest-based politics, or you have a value-based politics. Both is possible, and none of the one is better or worse than the other ones. So if we are now here and say we are all conservatives, and we try to find a common ground in values, so in common and in joint beliefs, in joint principles, to say the word value very, very shortly, then the question is how to define it. And there is a German philosopher of politics, Carl Schmitt, who said the essence of politics means that we have to distinguish between the friend and the enemy. What is the enemy? And Schmitt says the enemy is the one that denies what we stand for, who denies our existence. So now if we look into the world, what is denying our existence today? And you have a lot of challenges in that world. You have the challenge of the internet. You have the challenge of China as a trade giant. You have the challenge of Russia. You have many challenges. But what is really denying our existence as conservative Christians and Europeans? And my answer would be, it is what we call the woke wave. It is a philosophy that will destruct everything which we are and which we believe in. And so the first thing I would suggest to each and every one of you is to have a look into dominant philosophies of our times, even if you don't like them. And I would say the most important philosophers of our left-wing colleagues who attack us are Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. And they are post-structuralists, and what they say is that we have everything we are, we have to take into question. Everything is just a construction. Even ourselves, we are a construction. There is, Foucault says, nothing what we could call I. I is nothing but a permanent search for what we are in the current moment. And you see it, for instance, that they tell you, no, you have no biology. Whether you're a male or female or something else, whether you are one of 63 genders, it's up to you. You can decide it. So you are not even defined by your biology. You are not defined by your parents. You are not defined by your belief. You are not defined by your ethnicity. Everything is a construction, and you are free enough to change it. So if you follow this absolutely majority thinking, then everything what we say, no, we are human nature. We are children of our parents. We belong to a local community. We belong to a nation. We belong to the church. Everything is denied. So I would say that the woke ideology, the post-structural philosophy and what is coming out of it, that this is the real enemy, because it denies everything we believe in and what we are, not just what we believe in, but what we are. And so the first thing is to say we are united because we stand against this complete destruction of humanity, of ethnicity, of family. That is the thing that can unite us, even if we are here in 3 different political groups and groups. So if you follow, we have to transform it into a positive agenda. And once again, Carl Schmitt, he also wrote a political theology. And he said that every political theology had 3 aspects. The first is divine revelation. We believe that there is one God who has revealed to us truth. So at least we accepted that it's possible and don't fight against it. The second is authority. We accept that every human society is based on a kind of authority and hierarchy, and there is no anarchy. And the third is order. I would add tradition, and I would say conservatism means that we accept that tradition is an obligation to honor your parents, to give, to accept what you inherited, to take it as a value and give it to the next generation. This is not something you can do or you can't do. It's your moral obligation to go into that history, to go into that line of heritage and make it better and give it to the next generation. And if you do that, then you know that you have the grace of God that will help you to do that. If we say this is the core definition of conservatism, and out of that we defend what we are against the woke wave, then we have a common ground that, in my opinion, can help us to fight the major fight together, despite all the differences we may have in political question when it comes to trade, to foreign policy, to budget policy, or even to some details in other fields. So this is my big hope. So conclusion, first, we are not lefties, but we have to take care of what they do. We have to understand how they think. If you understand how they think, you will realize that this is a threat not to what we think, but to ourselves, to our identity, to our existence as human beings, as man and woman created by God. This is the enemy. Out of this analyze, we have our own agenda, our own political theology, and this political theology is strong enough to overcome all differences we have in different groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maximilian, for this interesting lecture. Next, we will listen Patrick Yaki, coming from Poland, a member of the European Parliament from ECR, and his lecture will be online. You can join us now.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Krach, one more time for your wonderful message and being concise. Now, biography for Patrick Yaki. Mr. Patrick Yaki is a Polish politician and member of ECR. Patrick graduated at University of Wrocław, where he earned a master's degree in political science. After that, he earned a PhD in safety sciences. He is also the chairman of the team for the protection of family autonomy and family life in the Ministry of Justice. Patrick is also an academic teacher at the Life in the Ministry of Justice. Mr. Yaki is also an academic in the University of Criminology, Warsaw, and at the University of Opole. Mr. Yaki is an author of the reform of the Polish penitentiary system, Work for the Prisoners program, which led to a 50% increase in the employment rate amongst prisoners. Thank you, Mr. Yaki. Thank you for joining us online.
Thank you very much for this invitation, and above all for this fantastic initiative and this fantastic meeting. I know that we are running out of time, so I will go to my lecture, which is my task is to ask to give to talk about the sense of the Christian of the teaching of the Christianity teaching in our centuries. Why the Jesus teaching is still have big value and could be still very important. And you probably, because in this room there is a lots of young people, we all are facing in Europe strong tendency towards critics of the church, Christianity, large governmental institution and operations are involving in fighting the teaching of Jesus. And the question is, why do so many strong people want to destroy Christianity? The answer must be sought in still very popular power circles like Nicola Machiavelli, probably well known to you. He criticized Christianity. He pointed out that the teaching of Jesus are bad for the authorities, because if you promise a reward for your behavior, not here on earth, but in heaven, the authority cannot control it. People may decide that they do not want to do evil for their reward on earth. They do not want to have material benefits here and do what is right and receive their reward in heaven. Moreover, if there are any universal rules, such as 10 commandments, that cannot be changed, the king has not absolute power. This is very important message from the authorities' perspective. King has not, or authority has not absolute power over people and cannot do what he wants. That is why so many rulers fight against Christ, because he limits their powers. Democracy is not the aim itself. Democracy is the means that directs you to the common good. And democracy without values may very soon change into clear or disguised totalitarianism, as John Paul II, the Great, used to say. We need to remember this. So if we want to live in a community that functions properly, and the meaning of life is not only to have material goods, as much as possible, at any cost, even abuse of evil, then Christianity is something like, social compass that can guarantee us the right balance in life. What is more, we continue to pose more and more questions about the meaning of life or the definition of happiness. This is very, very popular still in the world. And if there is no God, then there is no point to fighting for the spirit. What really matters is here and now. And if so, every menace can be legitimized, that then every villain can be justified. And do we have little evidence of it around us? Let's look around us, this current times, the most important topic now in the world. Murders, rapes, or deportation to the camps from Ukraine. If there is no reference to universal principles, one may relativize. And after all, we hear that we cannot act too decisively because we will pay more for gas and our standard of living will drop a bit. There is democracy, we can see. But what kind of democracy it is without Christ? And the definition of happiness. Let's reach for the most popular people in the world. One of the greatest, for instance, one of the greatest singers in the world committed suicide. She had fame, money, villas with pools, limousines, and that was not enough to make you happy, because she didn't have what is most important. The other famous actor had the next beautiful wife, hundreds of lovers, whiskey, luxury up to his arm fist. And he fell into depression and drunkenness. He's been a wreck of a man. Happiness of earth gave him nothing material, even though he could reach for almost everything. And Christianity defines happiness differently, like stable family, faithfulness, abstinence with stimulants, prayer, work on the spirit, and developing the ability to distinguish between good and evil. And then we see a drunk actor in his villa whose children do not even want to answer his phone. No woman he had even interest in him. He is lonely and unhappy. And let's try to compare this with a real reportage from the village in Podkarpacie. It's a Polish area on the east of Poland, where a senior with his wife and pensioner with more or less 200 euros hack each other in the old wooden house without central heating. They look the happiness in life because their own 2 sons and 3 daughters with their 8 grandchildren just left their golden wedding. They attended mass together. Then they were sung at home, many happy returns. When asked by the journalist if they need something more to be happy, They replied that they had everything they dreamed about and worked hard for their whole lives. So as you see, Christianity teaches us that the family, faithfulness, care about home, upbringing children, make sense and give happiness. It teaches us that not only here and now, but the tradition is a community of what has been, is, and will be. And that is why you have to respect the deceased, their achievements, their teachings, and think about the next generation. So we have to think not only about ourselves, but also about what world we leave to our grandchildren. And as you see, today the man who rejects God tends to replace him. Why do I need God and his teachings when I know everything myself? You probably heard this lots of times, especially from the young people from big cities. They probably they think that they know everything. They don't need God. They replace him. And Christianity teach humility. You will never know everything. It is reserved only for God. However, you should strive for perfection, and God will help you become better. And you have two paths. One, like I said, that you think you are God and you can do everything, and only here and now you try to find your happiness with lots of modern tools, or you can and what was in the past and what will be in the future, this is not important for you, or you can choose a different path. This is a more difficult path. However, I am pretty sure that this path is better for you and will bring you happiness in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this interesting lecture. Next, we will have Bert-Jan Rausen, member of European Parliament from ECR, from Netherlands, with the lecture Back to Our Roots.
Bert-Jan Rausen is a member of the Reformed Party, political party, SGP, part of the European Conservative and Reformist ECR. Rausen studied plant science at Wageningen University and research in the Netherlands. In the European Parliament, he is a member of the Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development, as well as substitute member of the European Parliament Committee on Fisheries and European Parliament Committee on Foreign Affairs. Rausen is also a member of the European Christian Political Movement, the ECPM, as he strongly believes that the biblical principles are beneficial for the society at large. Mr. Rausen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear friends, first of all, thank you very much for coming to Brussels and for visiting us. And thank you very much for organizing this event and for, let's say, creating this platform, also for us, creating this platform to speak about Christian values and about the relevance of these values, also for our daily work here in the Parliament. That's really important also for us to reflect on that and to go back, let's say, to our main Christian values. As previous speakers already mentioned and underlined, our founding fathers, the founding fathers of Europe, were real Christians. And I think it's important to be aware of that. But when we open our eyes and look around, then I think we have to ask indeed ourselves here in Brussels the question, are we still connected with our roots? Are we still connected with our roots, roots that were important for our founding fathers? In our days, we are often talking about the right to disconnect. And some people are saying this must become a fundamental right for all workers in Europe, the right to disconnect, the right to be unreachable outside normal working hours. And you can indeed, I think, discuss about the question, is that something for the EU to deal with, or can we arrange this at a more local level or national level? But that's not the point I would like to make today. The point I would like to make today and to stress today is that when we are looking around, I'm afraid we have to say a lot of people are already disconnected. A lot of people are disconnected from their roots, from their Christian roots. Instead of listening to the voice of the Lord, instead of listening to the voice of Jesus, most people are listening now mainly to their, let's say, their own hearts and to their own ideas. Self-determination and individual autonomy are the driving forces in our society in Europe. And I fully agree with previous speakers who said, indeed, let's go back to our roots. It's really urgent to do that. Let's go back to our Christian roots. And in my short contribution, I want to underline one important aspect in this respect. What does it mean to go back to our roots? In essence, I think it means let's go back to the Bible, and let's go back to the word of Jesus. What did Jesus said? Well, he said a lot of things, but one important message Jesus gave us, he said, also about his own life, he said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. And as followers of Jesus, I really think this is also our task, to serve each other and to serve the society as a whole. And I think this is also a responsibility of the government, to serve the society as God's servant instead of dominating the people. It's the responsibility of the government to protect the vulnerable and to promote justice. And this is also a task, in my opinion, for the EU, to serve and not to dominate. What we need here in Brussels is an EU who is just willing to serve the member states instead of dominating them and instead of trying to centralize all government's power here in Brussels. Things that I think are constantly happening, but I see when I look here around in Brussels, I see a lot of pressure of, let's say, centralizing power here in Brussels. Also, I think this is one of the outcomes of the recent conference on the future of Europe. Parliament and Commission are trying to concentrate more and more power here in Brussels. And I believe this is not the right approach. Instead of asking the question, how can we get more control on Europe and how can we get more power and competences here in Brussels, the EU has to ask itself the question, how can we serve the member states and the society? And if the EU puts this question in the center of the debate, I can assure you the EU would look very different. We would have an EU that would have more respect for diversity in the EU. We would have an EU that gives member states enough freedom to take their responsibility. And we would have an EU that stops with trying to become a superstate. This is the concept I fight for here in Europe, serving Europe. A EU who serves, a Europe who stimulates, let's say, cooperation between member states instead of an EU who try to concentrate all powers here in Brussels. And here I come to one of the points of criticism I have on the founding fathers, to be honest. Because the founding fathers of the EU, they suggested we have to create an ever closer union. And I think that was a mistake, that concept of the will to create an ever closer union. Because this whole concept of the ever closer union led, in my opinion, to a concentration of power. And that is not good for Europe. That's not good for the people of Europe. What we need is a Europe of cooperation. That's my short contribution for this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a very nice speech. Unfortunately, we do not have time for a forum today. We're very sad to announce this because that is the name of our organization, Forum Plus. However, in the days to come, we will have more time and we'll definitely have time for all your questions and thoughts. So I would like to thank all the panelists right now, really, in live and online. It was really a pleasure to listen to you all. And hopefully they'll get a chance in person sometimes to ask questions if they have. Thank you one more time. Don't forget your certificates. And for everybody in here, if you did not get your accreditations, they will be as you leave the door. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow.